Welcome back to Hey Kentucky. So with the bowl game over and a bow on the season, Mary Jo and I thought we would discuss a kind of a wrap-up of the football year. Let's start with this. Cats go 7-6, lose the Music City Bowl at the end. Do you consider this a successful season?
Yes and no. And I know that's not a great answer, but they didn't take a step back, which is good. They still get to the 7-game mark, but there are 2 games for sure out there, for sure, in Florida and Ole Miss that you know they should have won those games and didn't, and that makes it, to me, not successful, especially the Florida one, because it just cast a shadow on the whole rest of the season.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of how you look at this season depends on how you sort of look at life, right? So on the one hand, you win 7 games, and if you look at Kentucky history, in the last 20 years, it's only happened twice that they've won more than 7. They've only won 7, I think, like 5 times. So, I mean, in that respect, it's successful. You're right, they didn't take a step back. But if you're a negative person, you look at what might have been, and you say that Florida game, the Ole Miss game. But I will actually look at the other way. They could have lost some games that they lost.
Yeah.
Remember, I mean, they could have lost to Eastern Michigan, right? They could have lost in the game against Tennessee. And they got a win over Tennessee, only their second one in 35 years. So I think this was a year, Mary Jo, where the program stayed consistent, didn't go up or down necessarily. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's because only 2 times has Kentucky won more than 7 games that you're like, gosh, when it's right there,
yes.
If we don't do it, when will we do it?
I think we will look back. That is the one thing we will look back and say sort of what might have been. You know, Georgia's playing in the national championship game, and they have the #1 recruiting class in America, and it looks like, Mary Jo, they're going to be a power for years to come. You have to assume Florida and Tennessee have new coaches. You have to assume that works out for at least one of them, if not both of them. And if that's the case, you go, here was your chance. I mean, here was your chance to at least come in second in the SEC East.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. And I think that'll be something that lingers. Now, going forward, they still got a good recruiting class this past year. Do you think the future is still bright?
I do. But there's a lot of guys that may be leaving defensively. We don't know the status of Denzel Ware, and that's on a defense that has been maligned all year, wondering why it hasn't been better, and the best players may be leaving. So I'm a little nervous in that respect.
And, you know, that recruiting class is an interesting one because that was a recruiting class that, if you just look at the rankings, was the worst of the Stoops era. That was the recruiting class that everybody looked at and said, I don't know. And it ends up being the most important one. They got 4 juniors on this team with Mike Edwards, Denzel Ware, Josh Allen, and Jordan Jones. All of them could come back. None of them could come back.
Yeah.
And depending on what happens, I think that says a lot. The other thing, Mary Jo, is that next year's schedule is a lot harder.
Yeah.
I mean, next year's schedule includes a road trip to Texas A&M. You have to go to Tennessee. You have to go to Florida. Like, all of a sudden, it becomes much more difficult to win games, I think, next season.
At Louisville.
At Louisville, that's exactly right.
You know, and the quarterback situation is still in flux as well, and so is the wide receivers, and so is, honestly, the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's the other thing is we don't know if there's some rumors about LSU looking at Eddie Grant. I do think, however, the way the Music City Bowl ended, with the fact that Benny Snell got kicked out, the late drive, I think most people like the decision to go for 2. All of those things, I do think, give some positive momentum, because what I was worried about is if they lost to Northwestern, fans would just say, ugh, I don't care. I don't think that happened. What do you think?
I don't think that happened, too. I was actually really happy. I was glad we went for 2. I thought it was absolutely the right call. We didn't shoot ourselves in the foot a bunch to lose that game. It just, Northwestern is a good team. They had some issues, too. They had a bad call against them.
They did.
Threw their best defensive player out. So
who do you think?
Okay.
Who do you think's the quarterback next year?
Terry Wilson.
You do?
I do.
So you think the Drew Barker, do you think he's even on the team next year?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, I think Drew Barker may start game 1. I think ultimately Terry Wilson is.
Yeah, see, I don't think those 2 things are compatible. I mean, I think if Terry Wilson ends up being even considered for the starting job, I think Drew Barker transfers. I mean, that's not inside information. It's just a gut instinct. I think Gunnar Hoke and Terry Wilson fight about it because ultimately, I mean, Drew Barker, I know it's unfortunate, but he's had his time, his chances, and it just hasn't happened for him.
It just hasn't, and that's okay.
That's the way it goes. Ultimately, though, kind of a stay the course year.
Yeah.
But next year, I do think it's a key one. Like, they can't take a step back, and it will be hard not to take a step back with that schedule.